spy refused to answer any more questions. It was nearly midnight, and we were sitting in a hotel room that looked straight across Pennsylvania Avenue toward a floodlit White House. There already was a row of empty miniature scotch bottles on the coffee table in front of us, but I got up and walked across the room to the minibar. "One for the road," I suggested. I didn't want to leave, and I figured this was a better strategy than arguing. After all, he seemed to have quite a thirst. He accepted the drink, stirring it with a long, thin finger, and I noted he made no move to rise from the sofa. "I said all I'm going to say," he insisted. "Sure, some people you don't push, you just give them time. I've already told you plenty, right?" Right, which was the truth. For the past 2 hours he had been the perfect source, a man with a mission. He was a senior official at the National Security Agency, and he had contacted me after reading a New York Times magazine piece I had written about the John Walker spy case. The biographical squib in the magazine had explained that I was writing a book on his family of spies, and the NSA intelligence officer had made the effort to track me down in New York City because, he explained, he wanted to make sure my book was accurate. Mostly, though, he was angry. Even over the long-distance phone call, his patriotic dismay was an open wound. Walker told us that stealing secrets from this country is as easy as shoplifting from Kmart. And I'll be damned if the bastard isn't right. "We should talk about this," I quickly suggested. He agreed. "The nation's got to wake up before it's too late." And he added, "Next time you're down in Washington, let's get together for a drink." I caught the shuttle that afternoon. My plane landed in the last hour. Of daylight on a warm spring day in 1987, and it was dark by the time my cab made its way into the city, and I had checked into my room. I waited impatiently until precisely 9 o'clock, and then, as arranged, went downstairs to meet him in the hotel bar. He spotted me first and gestured with a small, very discreet nod of his head. Foolishly, I bounded across the crowded room with what I hoped was an ingratiating grin, and offered my hand. He took it, but the public display seemed to unsettle him. "It's a zoo in here," he announced before I could find a seat. "Let's go for a walk." He walked towards the old executive office building. The night was warm, yet the downtown streets were nearly empty. We talked about the cost of living in New York City, about working at the New York Times, about the Yankees and their owner, George Steinbrenner, about anything but the Walker spy case. I let him set the pace. The source always makes the rules. Finally, we were back at the hotel. When I walked to the elevator, he simply followed without comment. For the next 2 hours, he sat on the green damask sofa in my room, sipping glasses of scotch, while I hurled questions. From the first, he was a ready accomplice. He was eager to share what he knew because, he said with conviction, the public has a right to know. A moment later, though, he broke into a rare grin and noted, "Besides, if Walker knew it, it's not secret anymore." But by midnight, he was no longer cooperating. As happens in most interviews, even the most collaborative of sessions, we had reached the wall, the point he had resolved not to go beyond no matter what. Yet watching him nurse that last drink, I realized I wasn't the only one who was reluctant to call it a night. Now that he had broken a lifetime of training, and contrary to all his professional instincts, and shared classified information with a member of the press, he was not ready to slink off. Playing the deep background source is an intoxicating, aggrandizing role, and, as I have so often observed, it is a repetitious calling. It was in this high-spirited mood, helpful and confiding, hoping to prolong his moment, that he reached for something else to pique my interest. You know, he threw out, there's been a lot of talk around the NSA about outer space, weird stuff, UFOs. Uh-huh, I said evenly. I remained determined to steer him back to Walker, but for the moment I restrained myself. Rushing, I knew, wouldn't help things at all. Yeah, he continued. Heard they got some kind of all-star working group or something. A panel of hotshots zeroing in on the UFOs. Going to get the truth at last. Think there might be something to get? I was being polite. He shrugged massively. I don't know, he said after a bit of thought. But the story's going around that a lot of strange things are happening. We're catching a lot of crazy signals on our microphones and they're not from this planet. Yeah, that's a fact. You might want to look into it. And that was how it all began. That was how I first learned about the government's covert search for extraterrestrial intelligence. That was how I received the first clue that would lead me on a 2-year chase across the entire country, from military base under snow-capped mountains to installations hidden away in the midst of vast deserts, from laboratories guarded by military policemen to classified government engineering projects staffed by long-haired graduate students, from the New Mexico hill country to the woods of northern Wisconsin. That was why I first began to wonder what was out there and what the government really knew about it. Yet at the time I paid little attention. It wasn't the story I had rushed to Washington to hear. Instead, I affably told my source that maybe all this weird stuff was indeed a lead worth pursuing. Then realizing it was now or never, I made one last attempt to bring the conversation back to John Walker. And this time around, much to my delight, I managed without too much effort to batter a large hole through my source's wall of resolve.